Rightfully so, we are seeing an uptick in actions, vigils, calls, demands for action, demanding better, and we are hoping to weigh into that conversation a little more, taking a little time to get to some of the factors that lie below some of the symptoms and manifestations that we may be seeing at this point in time. And we are very happy to welcome a lecturer and head of the Institute for Gender and Development Studies at the UWI St. Augustine campus, someone who has been involved in Caribbean feminist movement building for over 2 decades, and more recently appointed Vice Chair of the Equal Opportunities Commission in the form of Dr. Gabriel Hossain. We also have a gentleman that campaigned on a platform of advancement in the form of President of the UWI Guild of Students, Warren Anderson. Thank you so much for making the time at this point.
Thanks so much for having me, DK.
It's a pleasure.
And the intention is to shed some light on the issue as an introduction on the broader way that we can go forward, because many times we just look at the surface, at the movements that is happening now, at the placards, and we don't necessarily want to make it about the person while we're not forgetting individuals, but we are trying to see what is the reason that we are getting into what it is we're seeing at this time. So with that in mind, though, with that broad kind of overarching theme, Dr. Hossain, I'll ask you to give me your synopsis, your view, or your perception at this time. Thank you.
I think the position of the Institute for Gender and Development Studies would be that we do need to tackle norms in society that make unequal relations between women and men, and women's lack of safety, whether in terms of their bodies and sexuality, or their use of transportation, or issues such as sexual harassment at work, that we need to tackle the kinds of beliefs and values regarding manhood and womanhood that help to create those inequalities and vulnerabilities. At the same time, I think we need to always keep in mind that while we want to pay attention to transforming gender equalities, we also want to transform other inequalities as well. We want to note rising levels of economic insecurity, rising levels of poverty, the kinds of stress that they may put on families, the kinds of vulnerabilities they may exacerbate, for example, for working women. And also, we want to think about the ways that COVID-19, we have seen a rise in violence around the world, and in Trinidad and Tobago, rise in violence against women. And we want to think about the way COVID-19 is affecting everyone, issues of mental health, issues of joblessness, issues of having to be home and negotiate power relations, conflict, and take all of these complex issues into account. And then the final thing I want to point to is our concern should always be with the kind of systemic failures that exist in addressing these issues in our judiciary, in our policing, and in our state response. And I think, seeing the reasons why as complex, but as areas that each of us could tackle in different ways is really important.
And definitely we want to speak about the ecosystem in just a bit, but I want to involve you, please, Warren. What are your thoughts on the matter at this time?
Certainly. Thank you, DK. And it's a pleasure to be here to be able to voice the concerns and suggest a way forward. And the main call to action I would like to make here on behalf of the Guild of Students is really for a review of self, but as an extension of that, a review of the institutions that we have established, because there is room in the community, at home, and also organizations, the public sector, and even the private sector for action, with the recognition that we are all stakeholders in this country. We all need to take action. And so the action that we're seeing now on the ground, it will be sustained, it has to be sustained. But what we need to see really is our growth and acceptance that we need to develop and change our attitudes and values as a country for the better. We believe that a great place to start is within institutions, And if I could use the UWI as an example with the establishment of a gender policy, which is being implemented throughout the university, I would say that is a good way to start. But what we need to see now is for organizations, particularly the private sector and even communities, to begin to snuff out these negative attitudes and values. And borrowing from what Dr. Hossain said, yes, gender is one lens that we can view this behavioral change from, but certainly the impacts of the economy, health, they all have a place. What we need to do now, yes, policy change is important, etc. However, we need to be mindful of a displacement of responsibility. And I will always be an advocate for beginning in communities. I would like to know how resident associations are dealing with the issue, how organizations are rolling out policies in order to treat with the issue. And everyone,
And it seems as though the camera is sticking a little bit there, but I want to pick up 2 points that Warren raised, please, Dr. Hossain, and have them go towards you, please. One, looking at the fact that many times it's easy to point a finger, but at the same time, we don't necessarily look and see what is within us that may mirror the system or the society that we are in, as well as the fact that there's so much that can be done at this point in time. But in terms of, and I wanted to ask you, because I said we'd get back to looking at the ecosystem. Warren also raised the point that so many things feed into it. So sometimes we may just want to look specifically at gender-based violence. But what are some of the other factors going into the ecosystem we need to look at? For example, sexual rights, health, pay equity, patriarchal systems. What are the things we need to look at? Because it is much broader and much more just intrinsic than just saying, okay, gender-based violence.
Thanks, that's an excellent question. First, the public needs to know how much work is actually happening. You know, there's an incredible amount of work going on, whether at the level of the kinds of response that the gender-based violence unit is trying to provide, or the Children's Authority in terms of addressing issues such as child sexual abuse and incest that create a basis for greater violence in homes, perpetration and victimhood, or whether it's in terms of the kind of social norm change, you know, just transforming and challenging. And I tend to use a really, you know, a language that is very clear about the need to transform masculinity, masculine power, masculine domination, the ways that it has been so naturalized in our society, whether in religion, in media, in politics, and so on. That's not an anti-male discourse. That's a discourse that seeks to challenge the way we are brought up to see some groups as having more rightful power over others. And that, of course, is a kind of injustice, however it plays out. So first of all, there's a lot of work happening. You know, there are calls for the health and family life curriculum in schools to integrate gender-based violence. That work is happening. If you hear people resisting health and family life education in schools because they think that quote unquote sexuality education should be done at home, you have to understand that that is preventing the work that can be done to have a public health approach to addressing gender-based violence, to educating children about gender-based violence in order to change the norms in childhood where they're being established. There's work being done, a lot of work in masculinities. The IGDS collaborates with Carryman, for example. We are hoping to, to just roll out conversations with a lot of men, because it's important for us to look back at our experiences growing up and question the ways that we saw people behaving that in our hearts as children we realized something was wrong, but which we then go on to sometimes mimic and perpetrate ourselves. And there are real concerns about women and girls' safety, whether in their homes, in the streets, in their workplaces, I mean, wherever it is they are. But the public should know that a lot of work is happening. And so this is more than just the marches taking place at this time. I mean, the marches are absolutely crucial. They have been I've never seen a response like this. It's so powerful. But we do have to know what work is going on. And so reaching out to the women's movement, the Coalition Against Domestic Violence, the Institute for Gender Development Studies, Womantra, CAISO, Conflict Women, Women of Substance in Tobago, a whole range of organizations that are part of an alliance for state action to end gender-based violence, and being able to build on those kinds of efforts is really crucial for anyone in the nation that is marching, that is wanting to take action. There's work happening, excellent work happening by police with perpetrators. There is work happening in the private sector with a private sector strategy to address gender-based violence. And the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber had actually created a domestic violence in the workplace policy to guide companies, however large or small, in addressing this issue within their company context. So whether it's in the private sector, whether it's in terms of addressing social norm change, and working with different methods of doing so. We'd like to work with the Bois Academy and how to use stick fighting. We would like to work with Carryman and they do their barbershop work. We would like to also continue to empower the women's movement.
And in terms of empowering, but in terms of continuing, we continue this conversation on the other side of the break, and you're already getting into some of the things that I want to speak to you about, but we are speaking with Dr. Gabrielle Hossain as well as Warren Anderson. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are speaking with Head of IGDS, UWI St. Augustine, Dr. Gabrielle Hossain, as well as Guild President Warren Anderson. And Warren, I want to bring you back into the conversation, please. What's in a name? We hear words like hero, champion, ally, being ascribed, sometimes taken up, appointed to different people. And I want to do this in a kind of binary equation right now as men with regard to women. Is there a word that you suggest and why? And I'll ask Dr. Gabrielle the same question afterwards.
Yeah, I would, first of all, I think the use of those words are great because when they are signed, they hold individuals accountable, right? But the word I would like to probably bring focus to is partner, because it means that once you commit to partnership, you stay every step of the way until there's success. And I would like to emphasize the call by Dr. Hossain for all the groups within Trinidad and Tobago that feel the need to be empowered and to amplify the call against gender-based violence, for more partnership to happen. There's certainly work that has developed way beyond our expectations sometimes, or way beyond the information that we have received. So there's great merit in reaching out to partner. Certainly the Guild of Students has been working within this year closely with the Institute of Gender and Development Studies. For the very first time, the council has been introduced to gender in the workplace, because we recognize that the need for internal development and partnership. And I commit here on national television that the Guild of Students will continue to work with the Institute of Gender and Development Studies, because being an ally, being a hero, being a partner means leading by example at all times.
And I take your point, and the words hero and champion, sometimes I'm a little wary of them, because one, it seems as though you're putting someone up on a pedestal. And by the same token, sometimes when you put someone up on a pedestal, you said, okay, well, you do the work, I can rock back. As opposed to saying this is something where all hands on deck are required at this point in time. And I'll ask you to weigh in on that as well, please, Dr. Hossain.
I think Warren has mentioned partner. I think that's nice. It has humility in it. Ally, I think for those, particularly men that are wanting to play a greater role, understanding that the women's movement has been doing this for 4 decades, has a lot of experience, a lot of excellent analysis. There's a lot of room to grow. I think in coming in that spirit of of a shared vision for a more peaceful Trinidad and Tobago for us all, for women and for men, for girls and for boys, is really the spirit. I think allies, we want allies. And I know this is there have been men who have really stood out and just been super clear, right? Everyone has a responsibility to create a greater safety for women and girls. That is non-negotiable. There's no context, there's no nuance. Everyone has that responsibility, full stop. And I know there's a lot of men that are feeling attacked, or that there seem to be generalizations about all men. And I think that, it takes a moment to sit with that discomfort and realize that it's not meant to be personal. It's just that the violence is so ubiquitous. The fear and threat is so much. It happens throughout a woman's lifetime. She could be 2 years old and be sexually abused. She could be 75 years old and raped when bandits break into her house. And we know it's not all men, just like men know it's not all men, but we do call on men to play a greater role than they have over these decades to put in the labor, to put in the time to think through the issues, to craft the long-term strategies. And I think that partner works, ally works. Our theme is pull up your brethren. If you're a man, just don't let it happen in your space. If you're the Maxi or Taxi Drivers Association, you make sure that every driver associated with your association or union, every space where you have taxis working that are in your network, is the safest place in Trinidad and Tobago for women. You pull up your brethren wherever they are. We're not going to deal with this. We're not going to end violence against women tomorrow. We know that with a heavy heart. We know there are more deaths to come. We know that the system failure is where our focus as a nation should be. Too often we focus on very quick solutions, no bail, jail, but the system failures, the delays in the court system, the absences from police, the low rate of convictions is where we need to focus on strengthening the institutions that are meant to protect the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And so, me, that's an okay message for us to have. And that's an open door for men to come in, listen, learn, feel, sit with discomfort even, don't be quick to get out of that. And really just put yourself in women's shoes for a minute and understand the emotions and also the expertise in the room, and just be prepared to join as partners.
And we thank you so much for that. We have just under a minute more, and Warren, I think I'm going to give you the last word in the sense that Dr. Hossain would have spoken in other places about the roles of mentoring, the mentors that have played such a huge role in her life. I'm asking you about the process of ushering an individual towards adulthood. Where do we need to look in terms of seeing how we can treat with some of these issues at different stages? And definitely, even before you start, I want to commit ourselves on this platform that we have here to moving the conversation forward, as opposed to just saying, okay, well, they're talking again. But the final 30 seconds is yours, Warren.
Yeah, thank you, DK. I think we need to look no further than the Institute of Gender and Development Studies to change agents like Dr. Hossain, who have been working very hard in this fight. I think they are in a position to validate the men who have partnered and who can stand as mentors. So I honestly believe that's a good place to start. And apologies for the alarm in the background if it can be heard.
We call it ambience and move on. But thank you so much, Warren Anderson. Thank you so much, Dr. Gabriel Hossain. The conversation, when some people say a luta continua, we say the process will continue. And on behalf of the entire news team, I'm DK Roster. Thank you for joining us. Have a good night.